Good morning and welcome back to Wellness Wednesday. This Wellness Wednesday, Fight CRC's advocacy manager, Aubree Thelen, recorded a fun video for you guys all about improv. What's it about? How can you get your family involved? And what kind of benefits it brings to you. Let's listen in.
Hi everyone, my name is Aubree Thelen and I'm the advocacy manager for Fight Colorectal Cancer. That is not all I do though. During my nights here in Chicago, I'm also a comedian. So I have experience with improv, stand-up, comedic acting, and sketch writing. I'm also a graduate of Second City's improv coursework and am currently in their conservatory program. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about improv, its health benefits, its rules, so you can play too, and then a couple ideas for you to get involved with people via Zoom or to actually play in person with anybody who might be in your quarantine bubble. So let's talk for just a moment to set the stage. What is improv? It can be a standalone art form. People can put on shows that are entirely based on improv. There are a couple that go on from different comedy venues throughout the United States. You might even be able to find one nearby wherever you might live, or virtually. So it can be a standalone art form, but it can often lead to other comedic art forms. But the entire premise of improv is that we don't know what is going to happen before it happens. We come into a scene and it is entirely improvised, which is why it's called improv. And usually it's comedic, but it can be serious, and we'll often interact with each other to create the scene. And even if we have the same suggestion 1,000 times, we might do a scene and it'll end up being different. That being said, there are health benefits for improv. It really allows you to get into the moment, to say yes to things if you're a person who often says no or could be a little negative, and it really increases your creativity. So I'll go through those a little bit more in depth and then go on to the rules and some ideas on how to play with people in your life. I do want to say, just in general, broad strokes, improv improves our interpersonal effectiveness, our empathy, and our emotional intelligence. And I'm not going to get too far into this, but improv can be used by a trained professional to help individuals suffering from a variety of mental illnesses, including anxiety disorders, autism spectrum disorders, and addiction. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you can look in your area for someone who treats with improv or drama therapy, and it's a great experience because of some of the things I'll mention now. We're going to talk about those rules, like I said, and I'll relate them back to these benefits, but I think first and foremost, from the description I gave of improv, I think that mindfulness is one of the big benefits. To create a good improvised scene, you have to be listening to whoever you're doing a scene with, whether you're doing a game or a full scene. You have to be able to create a world that's based entirely in your imagination together, and that requires that high amount of listening, paying attention to what the person is looking like, visual cues, what their emotions look like on their face or through their words and through the tone of their voice. And it really, one of the rules of improv is that we want everyone else to look good. We want them to succeed. So with that in mind, the ability to make a good scene depends on you really paying attention to what's happening. Another benefit of improv is increased creativity. And I think as adults, we often don't get to be as creative as we would like, or as creative as really children are, because sometimes the best improv comes from essentially playing like a child would. There are no wrong answers in improv. There are no wrong suggestions, just how you play with them. And so an example of this is that famous study that is talked about in a TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson. kindergartners were given a paper clip and told to come up with as many creative uses for it as possible. And 98% of those kindergartners, because they were so creative, were rated at genius level. Well, only 5 years later, those children, only half of them could perform at that same level. So as we grow older, we tend to lose creativity, and that can be a detriment in our daily life, whether that's work, whether that's solving any sort of interpersonal problem, anything at all. So keeping that in mind, improv always creates more creativity, which is a wonderful benefit of it. One of the last benefits of improv is the practice of acceptance. So when it comes to every one of these benefits, it's a real life scenario of you practicing these individual things, like mindfulness, being in that moment, like creativity, practicing it, and then acceptance. And I know that a lot of us can really struggle with the concept of accepting things as they are. But in an improv scene, one of the main rules that I'm going to go over next is to make sure that you accept exactly what that person who is in a scene or an audience member's suggestion, you accept it as it is. You say yes, and then you add to it. Without that acceptance, a scene can stop. And that's not something you want. Or a game can stop. And we want to create good scenes and good games and have everyone have fun. So making sure to accept and practice that acceptance is something that has been connected to dialectical behavior therapy as well. Although again, the focus of this is not therapeutic necessarily. So let's talk about these rules I've been teasing for a while. So the basic rules of improv, I've outlined 5. Lots of improvisers might say another amount, 10, 3. I think that there are about 5 that will allow you to have a really good experience creating a scene with someone else who is trained in improv or someone who is not trained in improv, as long as you all keep these general rules in mind. Learning the rules, you can always break them later in the future. So the first rule is one that is relatively well known due to some famous improvisers like Amy Poehler and Tina Fey, who also came through the Chicago improvising scene, but as well as other scenes. But the first rule is yes and. Very simple, hard sometimes to work with when you're first starting out. The premise, just like that acceptance piece that you can practice with improv, the premise is that you are always saying yes to whatever someone is bringing to the scene or a suggestion and adding to it. So instead of negating it, let's say someone walks onto stage, lays down and starts moving their legs like a tail. I'm already imagining it, moving their legs like a tail on stage, and then says something about washing up on the beach in France. I accept that person is either a fish or a mermaid or something, and we are in France on a beach. I accept that and I add to it. So that is the concept of yes and, that we are accepting it and we are adding and creating more based on that. Next rule is if you're making a longer scene or you're trying to play a game that's more long form, you want to make sure to be specific. Specific can be funny, tends to be more funny than really vague things. And that means identifying as quickly as possible who, what, where, and why. People might not be very engaged with a scene that's a fight between 2 people, but they're not talking about what they're fighting about or who they are to each other. But they still have the why. They're angry. Something's happening. They're fighting about something. But if you tell them that you're your roommates and you're fighting over the fact that one of them left the seat up on the toilet and but they're secretly in love, that's a lot of stuff that you could deal with in one scene, and a lot of things that people can get engaged with and root for. So that's the kind of scenes where you want to make sure that you're adding more, you're anding of that yes and you're adding specifics so that people are able to engage with whatever you're creating. Nice creativity extra in there. Third rule is to avoid questions if possible. Go for statements. Starting off a scene by saying, "Where were you?" doesn't do a whole lot for a scene. But if you start off with a statement like, "I heard that you went to the arcade and you didn't invite me, and I am not happy about that," that gives a lot of information. They're angry about the arcade and how they weren't invited. They have a previous relationship, obviously, because they know each other. And yeah, starting with that is a much better premise, gives more information for your scene partner to do more with. Fourth rule, one that I referenced before, is to support each other. The best improv comes from making other people look good. Oftentimes, I think that people think comedians or performers want to make themselves look good solely, and I think that improv encourages us to step outside of that fully and make our ensemble, our team, whoever we're in a scene with, whoever we're playing games with, it's only to increase the creativity, increase the fun, and yes, and everything. So making sure that you're taking care of those people that you're playing with, doing improv with, and also making sure that you are taking care of yourself, but you want to make everyone look good. Last, and I think one of the most important things of improv is there are no wrong answers or wrong moves. You are very creative and full of life experiences, and we want to hear that displayed in a game or on stage or whatnot, but you don't have to be right, which is, for some adults, a really revolutionary experience. And we're going to talk a little bit about these rules and how you can play with them with games in just a moment. So I'll bring up these rules as we talk about the premise of these games, but keep in mind all of them as we're talking. So first game is really a warm-up. I know that we're all in quarantine or some sort of socially distanced type of environment now. So this game is a little bit easier to play in person, not very easy to play virtually via Zoom or something like that, but you can feel free to try it out. There's nothing wrong with being creative. There are no wrong answers. But this game is a really simple warm-up, really gets you in the moment with that mindfulness, asks you to pay attention to what's going on, to accept what's going on, and go with it. So it's really simple. It's called Zip, Zap, Zop. And Zip, Zap, Zop is a premise that all you do is you do a specific motion and say a word, and the only requirement is that you make eye contact with the person that you're sending that motion towards. And guess what? All of the words are zip, zap, and zop. Those are the sounds you're gonna make. So you are about to see me play Zip, Zap, Zop alone in my apartment. So it's gonna be good. So we would start very simply with the first person, usually in a circle, making eye contact with someone, holding their hands and going zip. And then the second person would receive that eye contact, see that come their way, and then choose someone else in the circle and say zap. And then the final player in our game would, of course, put both of their paws together, make eye contact, and send a zop to another person. She's not a great scene partner, though. She's not contributing. The second game that we're going to talk about is one that you can easily play via Zoom if you'd like, or in person. And it's called 5 Things. It's really simple, and it really goes for that creative aspect of improv where you don't need to be right, which I will soon prove based on this. It's a very simple game, like I said. All it involves is one person starting off by giving a suggestion to someone else, saying, give me 5 things that, and in this case, I'm going to say 5 cereals that Albert Einstein would love to eat every morning. And the other person who's playing with you immediately would answer and say, matter, crispy rice, dog tags, kibbles and bits, light beams, cereal. They're all cereals. And we would both clap together and say, five things, five things, five things, five things, five things. Celebrating that creativity. Obviously, those were great cereals that Albert Einstein would obviously want to do. Both of these games are kind of warm-up games to get you in the mood, so you'd essentially be making them go on as long as you'd want. You could make them go faster, slower, whatever feels good for the group that you're in. Then the last game I'm going to talk about is a little bit more of a long form game, and I can't demonstrate it even with my dog here. You're going to require about 4 people total to make this game work. You could play it via Zoom or virtually, but you can also play it in person. So it's called Party Guess. It goes by some other names, and you may have heard of it at summer camp or really anywhere. It's a relatively common game. So it involves creating some characters based on suggestions and acting out, what are those characters, again, those specifics of like, who are they? What are they, what's the premise going on? Like, what are they mad about? Why are they mad? Those kind of things. Where are they? The where is pretty much set because it's at a party. So you'll have at least 3 people on stage, if not 4. The one person will go out of the room or mute their computer perhaps. And then you'd have suggestions from that last person who is not on stage or playing the game. So an example of 3 suggestions, let's say there's 3 people up there, 1 person outside or muted, and 1 person giving suggestions, so a total of 5 people. Let's go with that for right now. With that, let's say those 3 suggestions are a historical figure. So you could say someone like Napoleon Bonaparte. Always probably going to be a great sell. That first person would be assigned Napoleon Bonaparte. That's their suggestion for a character. Second suggestion would be an object. In this case, it could be bug spray. So that's their suggestion, that second person. The third person would get a suggestion, and it would be an emotion, let's say jealousy. So that's their basic character that the person who's out of the room has to guess. So that person comes back in and they're having a house party. They're having a little party with all these guests. So the people would come in one by one, start to give them slow hints as to who they are. The person who's guessing knows that it's going to be in order of a historical figure, an object, and an emotion. So they get to choose and guess while everyone else watches and enjoys. So that scene could go anywhere. A lot of the characters can interact with each other if they don't get guessed right away. A really great game to get some creativity flowing, some characters moving, some interesting ways to interpret objects or emotions, and to be specific. So these are my suggestions for you to get involved with some improv virtually or in person, but I will give you just a tidbit of homework. And a tidbit of homework is that lots of shows beyond anything that, Saturday Night Live has sketch comedy that is based in improvisation at the beginning usually. But a lot of sketch shows might have a basis in improv that then leads on to that sketch comedy. Not always, but there are also shows that are purely improv. I encourage you to check out Whose Line Is It Anyway online, Middleditch and Schwartz, which is newer on Netflix, or Curb Your Enthusiasm. Those are some examples. There's plenty of shows out there that also use little tidbits of improv, allowing actors to get really into character and provide some really funny stuff, because that's always what comes from improv. the most absurd, out there things like, what did I say? Light force cereal. Yeah, definitely Albert Einstein would eat that, and you're allowed to play with that. And then if you're interested in taking any sort of drop-in or course, I encourage you to seek out any sort of comedic venue that is near you where you live, to see if they're doing virtual courses or if you can take a safe socially distanced course, even just a drop-in, or if a full course. For me specifically, I know that I trained at Second City and they are doing courses online. You can check that out at secondcity.com. And also, I just encourage you to play around. Improv is a great art form that really is just about being really childlike and having fun, supporting each other. And at this point in time and where we are with everything, I think it's really needed, and really, really something that can allow us all to connect a little bit more while we're even socially distant. So please reach out if you have any questions, since I work at Fight CRC, but also seek out some of your individual venues or venues at different places across the country and get creative. Have some fun.
Thank you, Aubree, and thank you all for watching today. Join us in 2 weeks for tips on nutrition with Savor Health. Bye. Have a great Wednesday.